all, and welcome to our daily news show, The Big Story, where we talk about the hottest topics of today right in the heart of the newsroom. I'm Kimberly coming to you live from the Straits Times, and we are streaming on YouTube and Facebook, so do leave us a comment, like, and share it with your friends, as well as hit that bell to be told whenever we go live. I'll be joined by a couple of my colleagues today to be talking about what got you talking today. Our first story: 4 more people have died of dengue just this year, bringing the total deaths to 9 as of July 20th. With me to discuss this is journalist Timothy Goh, who wrote a follow-up story to this. Hello.
Hi.
So one of the patients who died recently was only 46 years old. Could you tell us a bit more about his case?
Yes. So the 46-year-old patient was actually the 9th person to die of dengue as of July 20th this year alone. And what's unique about his case is that the other 8 patients who died were actually 60 years old and above. So he's the only one who's sort of in the middle age range. Now, we understand that dengue is a disease that affects people across all ages, from young children to the elderly. But typically, if you're between the ages roughly of 12 and 60, then it's not very likely that you will die. So this person's case was a bit unique. He's not the first 40-something-year-old to die, but he is the first one this year. We don't know too much about what happened to him, but we do understand that it's likely that he sought help a little too late. So he had passed what we call the critical phase of intervention.
I see. So has the government sort of taken steps towards curbing the outbreak in clusters around Singapore?
Yes, so the government has been aware of the dengue situation and has taken many measures to stop its spread. So I think we're all familiar with what we call space spraying or fogging. So that's when you see the authorities going around and spraying pesticides into the air to kill the mosquitoes. Another method is they set gravity traps. These are actually little boxes that have sticky surfaces, so when female Aedes mosquitoes fly in and look for a place to lay the eggs, they get stuck to the surface of the trap itself. And NEA also sends its officials down to the ground to conduct inspections to check for stagnant water or potential mosquito breeding habitats. And finally, grassroots leaders, town councils and all, they do host events to raise awareness of the importance of dengue prevention and how to spot and eliminate mosquito breeding habitats.
Right, but actually dengue, sort of death from dengue is not super common here, right? So when does dengue lead to death?
Yes, so as you mentioned, actually in Singapore, the fatality rate for dengue is a relatively low one. We've had over 8,000 cases of dengue this year alone, but only 9 of them have been fatal. That being said, every death is one death too many. And it's important to know what could lead to death in the event that you have dengue. Broadly speaking, dengue affects 3 different categories of people. You've got your young children, so that's roughly below the ages of 12. You've got your young adults and adults, that's between 12 to 60, around there. And you've got your elderly, who are roughly above the age of 60. And these 3 groups manifest the symptoms in different ways and are affected in different ways. So the elderly are actually the most at risk in Singapore of dying from dengue. And this is because symptoms of dengue actually tend to be weaker in elderly people. So for instance, if you and I were to get dengue, we might get a sudden high fever, or very severe muscle aches. Whereas if someone in, say, the 70s were to get dengue, the fever may just be 37 point something or in the low 38 range. And their body aches may not be so severe as well. However, even though the symptoms are mild, this doesn't mean that the disease isn't affecting them. In fact, it does take a heavy strain on an elderly person's body, particularly because at that age, the organs have already experienced some wear and tear. And so if left untreated, it can lead to what we know as multiple organ failure, which eventually results in death. Another situation is that the elderly tend to have more pre-existing medical conditions, and dengue complicates the treatment of such conditions. So say, for example, a person in their 80s has high blood pressure and they're taking pills to lower that blood pressure. What dengue does is it also causes lowered blood pressure in an individual. So if you're already taking pills to lower your blood pressure and you have dengue, you need to monitor your blood pressure and adjust your medication dosage. You may need to adjust your medication dosage accordingly. So if the symptoms don't manifest, you don't know you have dengue, and you don't monitor your medication levels, then you might get dangerously low blood pressure levels. Yep, and this can also result in death or other issues.
I see.
As for young children, that's the next group of people. The first time they get hit by dengue, it tends to be quite mild, but a second infection brings about the risk of other complications such as plasma leakage. And in layman terms, this basically means that fluid and other particles will leak out of your blood vessels into the rest of your body. And this can lead to clinical shock. That's where your blood pressure drops to a very low level, which can also result in death. Now, the third group of people, young adults and adults, they tend to manifest the strongest symptoms, so the high fevers and the painful body aches. But for them, if you have no pre-existing medical conditions, if you're usually a healthy person, your body should be able to fight through the infection and you should be able to recover without fear of dying. However, in the case of some people like this 46-year-old, there's what we know as a critical period in which you need to be treated. So once you've had dengue for around 5 days, your body starts to undergo very rapid and unstable changes. For example, organ function is suppressed, and it's very hard to recover from this, so it can also result in death.
I see. So it's, very scary, and I think this is going to sound kind of repetitive maybe to some of you, but I think it's very important to emphasize what can the people do at home to keep this at bay.
Well, there is prevention, as we all know, the 5-step Mosey wipeout, which is basically getting rid of potential mosquito breeding grounds. For example, turning out water in your pails, getting rid of stagnant water in flower pots. But aside from that, I think it's very important to emphasize that you need to seek early intervention, early treatment, and close monitoring. And what this means is that if you have a fever or muscle aches, you should see a doctor. And if the doctor suspects that you may have dengue, they can actually run some blood tests on you to confirm this. And even if the first time you see the doctor, they think that it's not dengue, if your symptoms do persist, you should go back and see the doctor again, just so that they can monitor you and check up and confirm that it's not dengue. Or if it is, then they can get you treated.
I see. So, it's important to stay cautious and don't take your health for granted.
Yes.
Thanks, Timothy, for sharing more with us. If you would like to read Timothy's full story, do head on to www.straitstimes.com.